Hello, welcome to this edition of Ready Set, focused on the topic of cloud optimization. My name is Kim Weller, and I will be hosting our dialogue with an esteemed panel from some of the most recognized companies in the industry and from basketball. Don't forget, if you'd like more information about our community roundtable, our guests, or how your team can drive greater cloud efficiencies and performance, please visit ntap.com, Optimize Cloud. Let's start with some context. In 2020, we crossed the Rubicon, so to speak, where cloud infrastructure spending now eclipses spending on-prem. And IDC shows 2021 first quarter infrastructure spending for cloud at 15 billion versus 13.5 for non-cloud, which is certainly a validation of the value of cloud. That said, surprise bills are not uncommon, and the struggle is real to predict and manage spend over the lifecycle of applications deployed there. During today's conversation, we'll highlight some approaches to governance and tools that can help your organization optimize while you remain focused on the outcomes you need to drive. And we'll compare that to managing a basketball team. Let me introduce you to our excellent panel, starting with our special guest, Brad Stevens, President of Basketball Operations and former head coach for the Boston Celtics.
Thank you, Kim. I'm happy to be here. I think everybody will quickly realize I'm by far the least intelligent person here.
Well, I know nothing about basketball, so I look for your guidance in helping us connect that to our topic. Our featured guest, Jeremy Deshotel, takes a bite out of cloud costs in his role as solutions architect for Spot by NetApp.
Thanks, Kim. Nice to meet everyone. Looking forward to today.
Perhaps our most well-known technologist on today's call is Brian Gracely, Senior Director at Red Hat and host of the biggest cloud podcast, The Cloudcast.
Thanks, Kim. Excited to be here. Excited to be with lots of friends and smart folks, and excited to have a chance to talk to Coach Stevens about how to marry sports and technology and things that we both love.
We're also thrilled to be joined by Caroline Yap, Director of Google AI. Caroline has a storied career helping Fortune 500 companies transform while working for some of the largest companies in tech.
Thanks for having me on, Kim. And Brian and I actually met, the first time we actually met face-to-face was in Boston. So it's now coming back full circle.
And finally, but certainly not least, in his role as worldwide tech lead, Ed Siapet helps customers take advantage of Watson and IBM Cloud to propel their businesses, capping out his robust experience in the service provider and cloud space.
Hey, thanks for having me. Really awesome to have a conversation around cloud and how that marries up with sports, like Brian was saying. So I'm looking forward to it.
Great. Brad, thank you for joining us today. Our viewers certainly understand technology, but let's presume that, like me, they have little working knowledge of collegiate and pro sports. What I do know is that your desired outcome is a winning team, and a lot goes into that. Can you share with us your philosophy for optimizing the performance and makeup of your team as a coach and now as operations manager?
Well, I think anytime you're putting a team together, from my standpoint, you're trying to, obviously bring in talented people and figure out how to accentuate the talents of everybody around you in a sport that's very much interdependent, right? We need each other. We need the people next to us to play their roles and be a superstar in their role. And so there is not only a desire to find and look for that most special talent and the person that can do it all, but also people that understand who they are, understand what they bring to the table, understand how they can accentuate the person next to them, and all do so under this grand desire to win and to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And so I think that that's what you're looking for. There's a lot that goes into that. There's a lot of analysis that goes into it, both from what your eyes tell you and what the data says. And it's an imperfect science in some ways, but certainly we all know a great team when we see one, when we can see it functioning together as one.
Thank you. I think IT, like basketball, is kind of a team sport. Jeremy, I'm curious, are you a basketball fan?
I am actually. I had tickets to my first Jazz game last year, and it actually was the game that canceled the NBA. So excited to be a fan in the stadium again, and looking forward to this season.
Okay, so that means no doubt you relate to the very real preparation and planning that goes into making a sports team successful. And as I said, it's similar to the role IT leaders play in their organization. So, translating this idea of performance in basketball to cloud adoption by organizations, what critical process, people, or technology would you highlight for our listeners today?
I think performance, whether we're talking about basketball or IT, you have to look at the results. You have to look at the outcomes. And while having processes in place, having different technologies or tools is something that's great to have, it all starts with the people. And so, just like a basketball team, the best players don't win. The team that plays the best together wins. And so, you can have brilliant engineers, but if you have managers that don't allow them to experiment with new tools and technologies, don't allow them to push the boundaries of what's possible, you're not going to have a successful or a productive IT environment as well. So I think that it absolutely starts with the team. You've got to have managers that see the big pictures, leaders that can, push forward to do things you didn't think possible. After that's in place, you need obviously the processes to analyze the data, to make intelligent, data-driven decisions, and then the technologies and tools that support both of those.
Yeah, and I think we're going to talk a little bit more about those as we proceed. For Caroline and Ed and Brian, and not necessarily in that order, can you give us an example of performance optimization for cloud environments?
Sure, I'll jump in. I'll start. I think just like in sports, not everything is consistent, right? There's times when the business is very busy. Maybe it's around the holidays. Maybe it's around closing a quarter. Maybe it's around just a new promotion, a new launch of a product. And what you have to do to plan around those environments is going to be somewhat different than sort of your normal steady state, what goes on day to day. And so the ability to not only understand when those situations are going to arise, be able to do some foreplanning, but also be able to adapt to it on the fly, right? You may launch a product, a new service, a new whatever it might be, and it blows all of your numbers out of the water. It exceeds all your expectations. You also have to have systems in place that could adapt to that as well. The last thing you want to do is have somebody come to your website and get a site not found, product not found type of thing. So being able to optimize around both what you know, but also a little bit of what you don't know, I think is really important for companies. And computing fundamental capabilities to do it, and it really just becomes the onus of the company to figure out how to harness that sort of power.
Yeah, one of the things that I've also kind of noticed in terms of an upward trend is the, need to get more visibility into what's going on. So I think, as Brian was describing, people, being in environments where things are extremely successful, targets, get blown, or, we see incredible types of success with things. And then on the flip side, there's times when we see failures and systems go down, not be able to support loads. So I think a lot of that over the last many years has prompted people to understand that you need to have visibility into what's going on. And so when you're building systems, you're trying to optimize for performance, cost, security, all of these things is an extreme need for more visibility into what's going on. And that's cloud services, that's data center services, that's how the business is doing with a specific key, metric that they have. So I think visibility and observability is what a lot of this comes down to as well.
I would agree with both what Brian and actually also what Jeremy said. From my side, of the house, looking at things such as like AI, and which is a lot of automation. It's a lot of understanding of where things are as a baseline, and then how you train models to try to get to what's next. The what's next is where it gets a little bit more interesting. So if we were to try to tie it back to not just, sports for the athletes themselves, but also running the sports business, a stadium, how do you know when you have to actually top up food and beverage? Where should it go? What's traffic going to be like? Where are guests going? What are they primarily going to be drawn to? And then on top of that, tying that back to the athletes and the athletes' health, right? How are they performing? What's happening on the field? What are all the different sensors and images coming in? Where is there likely to be a security incident, physical security incident, and things like that? The observability is really key. Being able to take all that information and actually figure out where the baseline, where it's supposed to go, and then using AI to try to do some predictive analysis on that, and also what the recommendations should be on how to improve and how to go forward. I think the biggest key I've seen is that because there's so much automation, and it could, then the analysis from that and the insights from that can change operating models, has almost slowed people down in an analysis paralysis mode of what to do next, because they go, oh my gosh, I'll have to change everything, and people are involved. I have to either get rid of people or upskill people. How do I do that? And then it tends to stall the next phase of innovation. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and it's a massive task to try to get visibility and optimization across a set of environments that exist in multiple clouds and on-prem as well. So I think we'll come back later and talk about some ideas to help do that. But I'd like to get a little personal for a minute. And Brad, I'd like to start with you, because I think cloud and operations teams, they understand IT and the risks of systems going down, and security compromises often keep them up at night. You are well known for being incredibly calm during games, but what keeps you up at night?
That's a really good question. I think first of all, it's not as important as that. Secondly, what would keep me up at night is any time that I would feel like I am, 1% unprepared for a game. The second thing that I think keeps every coach up at night, and this is why I'm actually looking forward to this preseason and training camp and the season a little bit, because I won't be kept up by every detail necessarily of every practice, is until your team becomes, that functioning group of 15 that's all heading in one direction. There's usually a period of time where everybody's figuring out how they can use their strengths to best bring those to the table. Sometimes people get the roles that they want, and sometimes people don't. And when you do get to that point, whenever it is in the season, and not every team gets there, then you can really take off from there. And so I'd say the thing that keeps me up, or kept me up as a coach, certainly more than anything else, and I would envision probably pretty similar from the seat I'm in now, would be until we maximize ourselves, until we look like the best version of ourselves more often than not, because we figured out how to piece all of our strengths together. That's what, when you wake up in the middle of the night, you're thinking about how to do that a little bit better until you do. When you get to that point and you can start focusing more on the competition, preparing for the competition, and really get into that late season role, that's when you have a chance. But before that, there are a lot of sleepless nights along the way.
Yeah, I don't know about everyone else, but if I felt 99% prepared and executing on my cloud strategy, I feel pretty good.
It's that one thing that shows up in that one game in 82 games that you weren't prepared for, and it's funny how that you can do all that you can, but I guess you learn to stay on your toes too in this business, because you're always adjusting and tweaking anyways.
I think that's a great thread to follow, and for the rest of the panel, I'm very curious. Knowing this, right? What are you maybe not prepared for? What really keeps you up at night related to this topic around cloud performance and cost optimization?
From an AI perspective, bias, right? That's the biggest risk we have, because that's one of the things that keeps me up, is how can we be sure that the use case is the right one, whether it's, in the use case, in this case, like from a sports perspective, you may have a player with a set of capabilities. And so you're going to train the model to identify other players that have that specific capability. But what it doesn't take into consideration is what is different about that player compared to another. And so from my side, when I use bias, it's the models are trained on a set of data. The data has been scrubbed and reviewed by a set of people. If you only have the same set of people, because people buy from people and you tend to stick with the same group of folks, how do you know that you're not missing something else that could be better for the team and could be better for a system or a situation? And so the thing that keeps me up at night is how do we reduce or remove biases from optimizing and creating an optimized outcome? That's for me, the stressful part of it.
Yeah, I'm really curious. We get a lot of people, and I'm sure with this audience as well, that are in different roles, right? Some are sort of frontline day-to-day IT. We've got folks that manage various size teams, and then obviously we'll have folks from leadership. I'm curious to pick Brad's brain a little bit. He's been in roles where he was sort of David and Goliath when he was at Butler. When you're at the Celtics, you're one of the top dogs, but you play in a league where everything is sort of equal footing, if you will. And now you're in a different role. Like, when did you think about optimizing? Sometimes you just want to let the things, flow and see what happens. Other times you're trying to optimize. Like, how do you think about that in your different roles? Like when you were, a college coach at a smaller coach, now you're at you're in a bigger place. Like, how did you used to think about that, given the resources you had, and when was the right time to optimize versus, letting people just, go figure things out?
Well, I think that's a really good question. At Butler, we were unique because we couldn't get the best of the best, especially with where we were at that age and stage in our program. But we could get, we thought we could get a couple of people that could play anywhere in the country and then fill in around them with the perfect role players. And that was really our focus. And so we had to get the A players, if you will, right, and kind of go from there. And the one thing I will say that I learned there is you learn how to optimize based on, not only getting the right people in the right spots, but you have to operate under the right cost, because we didn't have a budget that was significant. We were more operating like we were, that was a team in a mid-major league. So you had to know when you were recruiting somebody and it was time to say no and move on. Sometimes they won't tell you that. And you had to know when you had really a chance and you really need to invest more time in that. And that was probably the biggest thing from that standpoint. And the role I'm in now, it's just everything is so much bigger. Everything, the budget is an issue to an extent of we have a salary cap, and there are all kinds of rules that go along with that you have to be, acutely aware of in every decision that you make. And at the same time, we do have enough in Boston to always be good. And we have enough to try to put ourselves into the mix. And again, the key goes back to making sure that you're spending, again, those big contracts on people that are A performers. And again, just like Butler, finding people that accentuate those guys in those other spots.
Brian, is there a way you'd relate that back to our IT challenge?
Well, I think it's two things. It's like Brad said, you got to find the right people, which we're always looking for. And then, as technology, but we have the advantage of tools like Spot and other things, AI tools, to sort of help augment that. So I think we get to cheat a little bit in that we have a few more resources available to us beyond just, human reasoning and hoping we get the right people, right? We can put data behind some of it and predict things.
I think the other thing that we have a luxury of in IT that maybe is a little bit different in the sports world is the ability to rapidly make mistakes and iterate through them. And I'm talking more in the meta sense, because we were talking a little bit about team players, right? With team players, there's a bit more of a commitment that you're making, and you've got to give it some air to breathe and mature. You can't just, change all the time. And in technology, you shouldn't change all the time, but you do have, I think, a lot of flexibility to go ahead and make those failures. And so, when you're going through, I was kind of thinking, Kim, you were saying what keeps you up at night. It's part of it is have enough rope to take risks and push things forward, but not hang yourself, right? And I think that's really, when it comes to things like security and compliance and governance and making sure that things are safe and good for you, you want to have that balance. But then also, it's like raising a teenager. You've got to give people freedom to create, right? Freedom to make mistakes and do those things, or else you won't move forward. So I think there are a lot of parallels. And Brad, you probably encounter the same thing. Like you guys change things up all the time, not only from a business perspective, but players, right? Like if something's not working or it feels slightly off, you're going to make changes as you guys need to. And I think that's critical.
And it doesn't always need to be big changes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's actually a great point, Brad. Like it doesn't always have to be big changes, and that's the thing, especially when it comes to artificial intelligence, right? Everybody thinks that, oh my gosh, once you've built it, you cannot fix it, and that's not entirely true. There's many components of things that can change to inform the actual system you've built to go to the next version and how to grow. So I think that it scares a lot of people when they hear about artificial intelligence and they think that it's going to be the Terminator walking through a stadium serving you your lunch, which is not the case. Unless Brad has something up his sleeve and I don't know about it yet.
No, that's way above my abilities. I thought your line about reducing bias is interesting, and the parallel to sports is I think that we oftentimes pigeonhole people, especially later in their careers, into things. Again, they have to find what they do well and add value to winning within their roles and their strengths. But I think early on, sometimes we say, well, this person can't do that and therefore can't be a part of a winning formula, where you see them move to another team or you see them get another role with a new coach, or maybe some player gets traded and they bring out the best in that person. And I think that, it is interesting. There are certainly a lot of parallels.
Yeah, and we actually do quite a bit of that here at Google, especially when it comes to ethical and responsible AI. Those are the big questions that we really think about. And most of the executive briefings and customer meetings I have now, it's not about the technology anymore. They really focus on those things and how those values that we are intrinsically building into our AI can help them change the way they think and help their industries change the way they are trying to do stuff as well, which I find really fascinating. I'm actually having business conversations that are a lot more altruistic than just the usual top line, bottom line, which does get there, right? That is the ultimate goal. But the bias questions are real, and they're looking at growing their companies 10 years, 20, 30 years out, and what kind of legacy they actually want to leave.
I think, we've been talking a lot about the role of people in making these big bets or understanding small changes that you need to happen. Brad, I think, for you, obviously maintaining a positive attitude and the right mental state, that's important for your teams to work effectively, as it is for our IT organizations in this time of change. But it's probably at a whole different level, I think, for collegiate and pro sports. How do you help your team maintain the right mindset?
It's a real challenge, especially when you get into this level, because it's 82 games, it's nonstop, it's a arduous, long season, it's tiring. You are getting immediate feedback, I'm sure for some of the players by the thousands to tens of thousands from people you don't know, and from obviously reactions and responses to the game. And it can be just as debilitating to listen to all the praise as it can be to hear all the scrutiny. And so I think keeping the right mindset, being able to resist the noise appropriately, being able to maintain a perspective throughout the season that you're a part of a team. Teams come together over the course of time. You don't have to be your best on the first day. We've got to be working towards our best. We've got to constantly operate and live a growth mindset every single day, and everything that we're doing helps you navigate that journey better. But it's easy to get caught up in the emotions and the roller coaster of the wins and losses. And if you do, it's just too hard to maintain your stamina all the way through. And so you have to have something bigger to focus on. Obviously, everybody's got the objective, the goal to win it all at the end of the year. That's an easy one, but you're not going to win it all on September 28th when practice starts in a couple weeks. You're going to have to be building towards that. And so your focus has to be on the things that you can control and on daily growth.
I love it. So I think now's a good time as a reminder, if you would like to get more information about our community roundtable, our guests, or how your team can drive greater cloud efficiencies and performance, please visit ntap.com. That's like our stock ticker, ntap.com/optimizecloud. Okay, so we talked a little bit about outcomes and people, but I would love to get back to this idea of, I think somebody mentioned salary cap, or the fact that we have to work within our budgets and the necessity to optimize using the right tools for the right job at the right cost. And we've had about 10 years, albeit with a rapidly changing cloud landscape, to better understand whether and also when applications should reside in the cloud versus on-prem. And harnessing or orchestrating that cloud infrastructure spend is a big part of that decision making. And so, Brad, Brian, Ed, and Caroline, what can you share with us about how to achieve that balance?
Well,
Sure.
Go ahead, Ed.
So I think that, over the last few years, we've had a lot of conversations about thinking cloud was cheaper. It's a better way to go. And I think we've really evolved over the last few years to have more of a practical discussion with customers around, the right tool for the right job, and not necessarily chasing shiny balls and the latest technology. So I think really when customers start to look at where they've gone, there is a certain level of investment that they've already made in the cloud for most customers. But now I think it's all about being a little bit more pragmatic about where they deploy things, and how they make those decisions.
Yeah, I think I would add, it's, for a long time, we tended to treat technology and IT as sort of a given. It needed to be there. And I think what we're seeing more, especially with the cloud, is this realization that it's not just technology, right? You really need to start with, what business problem am I trying to solve? Does the needs of that business problem or the outcomes of that business problem, do they make sense or more sense in the public cloud? So is it something that requires things to be more scalable? Is it variable? Like Ed said, do I need to do a lot of experimentation? And I think we're seeing more and more companies that understand, how to think about that, right? They understand more and more, how to sort of think backwards from the business problem. And then I think they're also realizing that, the way that they used to do things, maybe the team that used to run old systems may not necessarily be the right way for what you're trying to do in the future. So it's the equivalent of, if you went back and looked at old Celtics videos, how they used to play and how Brad's teams play now. Yes, they're both trying to score more points than the other team and win games, but really vastly different ways of doing it. And you have to realize that's okay, right? Like you don't have to necessarily always bring everything old into the future. Sometimes you just need sort of a new start. So I think more situational awareness around that is becoming more and more commonplace for companies.
I'm seeing the same thing as well from my side of it. Everyone, I brought up earlier, right? People always think that AI means that it's going to automate everybody out of a job, but it's not the case. It's changing the value a person can bring. It's the whole point of having a system like that is to go, okay, do I really need that call center agent asking a simple question that could be served by a virtual agent, right? For example, what's my balance? But I don't want to use the app. I'm somebody who cannot use the app. I need to just talk to someone. Do they really need to speak to a human to really do that? No. So there are things that can be automated, provided to a virtual agent, and then allows the human who's in the loop to do that higher value service, to do things differently, and evolve as we go, versus keeping the person doing the same job over and over again. And so I know that it's all around people again, but that's really what AI is for. It's not just to make the system better, but it's also to make to humanize what the system does, but change it towards the future and make it where the humans who are still in the loop are doing the higher value service, and everyone feels, how should I call it, more fulfilled in what they're doing as well in the future.
Yeah, that's a great point, Caroline. You mentioned something which was letting the engineers work on that high value effort instead of being stuck in these menial tasks. And that's something that, we've heard the word optimization, we've heard the word automation thrown around a lot. And what I think people get focused on too much is that immediate result of what that tool is going to provide, of what cost savings, how many dollars is it going to save me, and not looking at the bigger picture, which is, one of the things AI provides, which is freeing up that time, freeing up that energy to allow people to do what they do best, which is to think, to innovate, and to create.
I think a lot of that stuff, though, it's a very cultural thing. Like I've noticed with customers that I work with, you'll find the ones that are focused on reducing costs continually, and so they're not looking at where they're taking away from things. They're just looking at kind of, okay, what's my bottom line look like? And so I think culturally, it's good when you have leadership. And talking to Brad, it just kind of resonates. Like sometimes things take a while to perfect, and it's never going to end. But at the same time, looking where you're going to grow as well as you're going to save. And I think optimization, as in its entirety, encompasses all of those things. And so I think a lot of times customers lose sight, and they're like, we're going to move. I mean, we all heard this for a while, right? We're going to move to the cloud. Like we have a cloud first initiative. And you'd say, why? Like, I don't, what's the driver behind that? Well, cloud's cheaper. Well, cloud's not necessarily cheaper, but you can definitely do some really interesting things with it. Caroline, you're talking about AI and machine learning, but not only that, but optimizing large scale systems and dealing with burst workloads and all. There's a lot of things there. But when you're talking about it, you really need to kind of, I think from a leadership perspective, look at it holistically and calculate all of those things, take all of those benefits of cost reduction where it makes sense, and business optimization and spending money where it makes sense. I think those are really critical parts of the whole optimization conversation in general.
Yeah, and I think, Brian, I've heard you speak pretty eloquently in the past about, even if you're at a certain starting point, the need to build those guardrails and to actually have a governance structure to make sure that you're still being able to be nimble at the same time that you're maintaining the security and the performance and the cost models that are required.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's real simple. So if you're a bank, for example, at the end of the day, yeah, it would be great to have, a really cool banking mobile application. But at the same time, if you screw up, you don't put the right systems in place, and you're on the front page of the Wall Street Journal because you got hacked and 100 million users lost their credit card, like you're not that cool anymore, right? It's a bad day. So yeah, you have to be able to balance the two of them, when you're playing offense and trying to look cool and impress customers, and when you have to play defense and just do the normal things to keep the business running and optimize it.
I like that analogy there, Brian. I think people don't like doing drills. And that's especially true in our space, right? In tech, people don't like doing the drills because it's boring. Nobody likes practice, right? Nobody likes practice. But the point is, like, if you don't do that, if you don't use the governance, if you don't do the right use cases and the right frameworks, then you end up with bad data. And when you have bad data, then your AI is trained on bad data. It's the whole garbage in, garbage out scenario. And since we also talked about practice, like I really do wonder what Brad thinks about.
Yeah,
about
it's a great segue back to basketball. And I think,
Yeah.
Brad, you briefly mentioned your responsibilities as president of basketball operations, but I know that you hopefully can share a little bit more about how you balance the economic elements without giving away some of your competitive advantage in the team that you actually have to help you with that.
Yeah, I would go back first to the practice thought. We always talked about we always wanted everyone in the building to find great value in becoming a master of the mundane, right? That was the great separator, was your willingness to come into work, be on your routine, put in your time in the weight room, put in your time on the court, recognize that the people around you may not even recognize your daily growth. But over the course of a long time, you'll really grow into what you ultimately want to be, and hopefully make our team better. I mean, from the new seat that I'm sitting in, I have a much different view, Kim, and back to your question about how, the role that economics play in here. I was an economics major in college, and I couldn't tell you which line is supply and which line is demand right now, 20 some odd years later. But I do know that, we have a very sophisticated system in the NBA with regard to managing the economics, again, of making sure you're spending money in the right places. And obviously there is the team, there is building a team within a salary cap structure. There are all the different things and rules that go along with that. And then it's building the right staff around them and the right performance staff around them and the right way to optimize, everyone that touches them on a daily basis, whether that is in the weight room, in the training room, from a mental wellness perspective, from a coaching perspective, et cetera. And so that is very much a major change in my role, from going basically just to, okay, we have all of these resources. How do we put the pieces together? Now it's more figuring out what resources we need to maximize ourselves in the areas that are figuring out how to put the pieces together.
What happens if you go over your salary cap?
Well, listen, this is a big, sophisticated, complicated thing. Luckily, I have a couple of people programming for us that have basically could probably work for any of you. I don't want to oversell them right now. But they've put together some different things that I can basically just play with, a trade checker that I can play with on my computer. And that's how I've learned it. And so the way that they've built our programs have both helped us identify our strengths, our weaknesses, everything that we need from a data standpoint on our own individuals, but also the rest of the league. And so we can make quick decisions at the click of a button, which is really, really nice. But if you go over the salary cap, and there's only certain ways you can do it. You can't do it by spending on people that are on other teams. But if you end up going it with spending on your own team, then you pay a pretty significant tax. And if you pay it multiple years in a row and you're a repeater tax, it's even more significant. So we're all very mindful of that. And we all have our, the orders from within our organization. I work for people that are very, very willing to spend money and to go into that tax. But obviously there's a responsibility on our part to make sure that our team is a good one if we're going to do those things.
So Jeremy, I'm going to come over to you now. And so keeping in mind that basketball analogy, can you elaborate more for us on the tools that you have visibility to for IT and DevOps teams to use as they balance performance and cost and business outcomes?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I actually just had a thought listening to Brad there. So many times we see customers take, these spreadsheets and these graphs, and they're looking at the data, they're looking at the results, and then they're trying to make decisions. And what I think about that is that's very similar to, a coach. You can have all the game footage, you can have all the best workouts, you can run drill after drill after drill, practice after practice after practice. But in IT, when you push an application into production, it's like stepping on the court. It's a completely different game. Everything that you've done up until that point has prepared you for this. But if you're not implementing something to continuously optimize, whether it be from performance, whether it be from a cost standpoint, that would be like, Brad saying, okay, guys, I've prepared you. We practiced, we drilled, we watched footage. Good luck. I'll see you after the game. And not being there to coach throughout the game. And so what we do at Spot is we offer tools to do exactly that. You'll get the analytics, you'll get the data, you'll get the reports that you need to drive decisions, but in real time, your applications are able to communicate their needs. And in real time, we will constantly optimize your infrastructure. We will ensure that you're always running the most efficient from a performance standpoint, as well as from a cost standpoint, the most efficient infrastructure for your particular applications. And then using AI, using analytics, using machine learning, we're able to predict new optimizations, new benefits, new ways to scale your applications to get you even better performance, as well as better cost savings, and to free up that time where a lot of these processes in the past have been very manual endeavors, to free up that time for the engineers on your team to focus on innovating and doing what they do best.
So Jeremy, sports are all about stats. Do you have any metrics you can share with us?
Sure, yes. As of last year, our average customer across all public clouds saved 73% on their compute cost, as opposed to going with just on demand or pay as you go pricing. It's phenomenal. From a implementation standpoint, it's great to have this awesome tool, but how big of a lift is it? Many of these solutions, you can go from zero, not having an account, not being set up, to actually having applications running on spot, saving you upwards of 70% in under a half hour. We have one of our customers, Duolingo, that within a week tested the solution out. Within another week, one engineer, a couple hours, moved their platform over and saved them $1 million that first year. So very easy to implement, very easy to get results, and incredible results in terms of cost savings and performance.
Appreciate that. Certainly just one tool in the arsenal that companies have to build this governance and visibility. So we're nearing the end of our time together, and for our panelists, can each of you give me one key takeaway for our listeners related to optimizing performance and costs for our teams? And we're going to end with Brad.
Caroline, ladies first.
Why, thank you, Brian. I will take that. I would say as I've mentioned bias, so I am going to bring that up again. I think that we need to have more people involved in the process of even optimizing any kind of business decision, whether it's cost optimization, whether it's a new product or a new solution and things like that. Look outside the typical group that's used to make those decisions, and try to ensure that the key elements for driving or growing that specific business case includes people from many different backgrounds and from many different industries, so that you're not one-sided when you're actually thinking about how to do that kind of optimization.
Yeah, I'll go. I think it's really critical to have situational awareness, where you are in your business, where you are in the marketplace, where you are versus your competitors, and realize that optimization is not a one-time event. It's an ongoing event, and you really need to make sure that you have not only the right tools in place to give you data to be able to make smart decisions, but then you also have processes in place that the people around you, the teams that you have, are able to go implement them and be successful with them. So I think situational awareness is really important, and then building the systems and the processes around it so that you can actually take advantage when you see opportunities.
And I would just kind of add on to what Brian was saying. Don't be afraid to start trying things. I think, when it comes down to optimization in general, you should be more than willing to try things out and get some quick feedback to see where you land. As Jeremy was saying, I mean, there's people who are kind of just, doing business as usual, status quo. And if people don't start to try to optimize these things, and continually try those things, then they could be leaving a lot of money, a lot of business growth, whatever it is, leaving a lot of things on the table.
I feel like I should have gone first. Everyone stole mine. But, like Brian said, absolutely, continuous optimization is correct. It's not a one-time thing. It's not a quarterly thing. You're leaving a ton of performance and potential on the table if you look at it that way. Another big, thing I've always focused on, both in my personal career as well as on a day-to-day basis, is not being married to your ideas. Being willing to fail fast, to fail often, to learn from it, to iterate and improve on the, what you take from those failures. So just like a coach probably learns the most and a team can grow the most from the games they don't win, you can do the same from an optimization standpoint as well.
So I really am the one that got everything stolen. I would say, I had a coach who was my boss at Butler, Todd Licklider. He used to quote Twain. I apologize for the length of this letter. I didn't have time to write a short one. To me, that is, where as coaches, you talk about an optimization standpoint, we're trying to get. You work and you work and you work, and you have to put in all the hours, and you have to take all of the mountain loads of data, and you have to streamline that into one simple message and do that for a game that is played with, that needs to be played with fresh legs and a clear mind. And if we can do all that, if we can, if we can make the message correct and we're all on one page, then we can optimize ourselves.
Thank you all. It's been a fantastic panel. Hopefully there are some narratives that people can take away as they think about their cloud strategy and what the comparison to basketball is. Once again, for everybody, please go to ntap.com/optimizecloud for more information. And final thanks to our entire panel, and especially to Brad for being willing to join a group of technologists and bring your unique perspective to our conversation today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank